Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the December Cyber Bytes Networking Event hosted or brought to you by Cyber Bytes Foundation. My name is Joel Charlotte. I'm the Director of Operations for the Foundation, and I also have the distinct honor of being the moderator for today's panel, which is focused on virtual reality and what's coming in 2021. From the Foundation's perspective, our mission here is to provide education, innovation, and outreach programs that are responsive to national security concerns and challenges. We do that really through three programs. So we have the Cyber Bytes Academy, which helps us with the education, and we have 5 classrooms here at the Quantico Cyber Hub. We teach boot camp style courses, and we're developing our own content to really kind of change the way we educate the workforce around cybersecurity and some of these other emerging technologies like VR, which we'll talk about today. The American Cyber League is the second program that we have, and that program is really helping us with the innovation part, and we bring over 1,000 members together to do that. We've got labs that we're building on the second floor, 7 of them that are going to be focused on things like artificial intelligence, machine learning, data analytics, quantum, other emerging technologies, and really it's meant to be a playground and a location for our members to come together and do some great innovation. We've also got some AR and VR labs upstairs as well, which will also further tie into this conversation. The third program that we have is really the Quantico Cyber Hub. It's the building itself. It's over 30,000 square feet of administrative and classroom space and lab space, meeting space, et cetera. And we really use that as a central point to collaborate with our members and with the community. And so we've named it appropriately as a hub and a central location where we do that. Part of our outreach efforts that we do include hosting networking events like this. So every month we put on what we call the Cyber Bytes Networking Event, and we really pick a topic of interest to the community and to our members. And as I mentioned, this month we're focusing on a topic that's near and dear to my heart, which is virtual reality. I'm going to ask the panelists also to go into probably a little bit of augmented reality as well, so we can broaden the conversation. But we're really looking and talking about immersive technologies, where they are and where they're going. So we're doing this virtually today. We had started bringing panelists back in person between COVID-19 and, of course, if you're living in the Northern Virginia area, we had our first major snowstorm. And so as it typically does, kind of shuts down Northern Virginia and made traffic and traveling a little hard. So we settled back into a virtual. No problem. We've been doing this for a while. I think we're all kind of pros. So for this one, we're back to an all virtual panel. I think we're going to be really good, and I think you're going to enjoy the panelists, who I will introduce to you shortly. Before I do that, I do want to remind everybody that the Q&A panel is there. We will save time for questions and answers at the end of this webinar, and so use the Q&A panel that should appear on the right side of your screen. Enter your questions in there. We'll get to them at the end, and we look forward to some great questions. So today we're going to talk about immersive technologies such as augmented reality or AR and virtual reality or VR. And I really consider these technologies, actually a lot of people consider these technologies to be driving and or enabling the 4th industrial revolution, right? So a term, if you haven't heard that, kind of being thrown around, there's the 4th industrial revolution. I use the term immersive environments as a collective term because I see AR and VR as very complementary technologies. And I think our panelists will agree, but we'll find out here shortly. Others use terms like XR or extended reality. Microsoft uses mixed reality. And soon Apple is about to introduce synthetic reality, right? So we've got a bunch of different realities out there. And part of today's conversation will really be to get to the heart of kind of what we're talking about and what the difference between some of these terms are. Because these terms also can be very confusing to users, right, or to the people who may or may not understand the ecosystem. So we hope today to kind of help change that and shape that up. So to help me with these conversations, we've assembled a great panel today. You can see them on the screen there with you, and they bring a diverse set of experiences and viewpoints, and we're excited to kind of break into that here. So first, we have Sophia Moshasha. Sophia leads many initiatives to strategically apply virtual and augmented reality to various industries. She has developed partnerships between immersive technologists, industry, and government organizations for the purpose of translating technological vision into high-value solutions. These solutions are successfully brought to market through her ability to simplify and articulate complex technologies into relatable, human-centric applications, accompanied by her extensive network and media presence. She's sought after for her ability to gather global communities to propagate the adoption of emerging technology, and she does that through her leadership position at the VR/AR Association. There, she leads the Washington, D.C. chapter and various committees and co-hosts the association's podcast called Everything VR and AR. Sophia, great to see you again, and thank you for joining us.
Happy to be here.
Next, we have Michael Storrs. Michael is an accomplished information security professional with 2 decades of experience in areas including cloud security, big data, security analytics, insider threat, access management, and ethical hacking. Michael currently works with government agencies and helps them secure their cloud and hybrid infrastructure and improve their overall security posture. I should mention that he works at Google doing that. A published author, Michael is also a regular speaker at InfoSec conferences. So we look forward to the conversation, Michael, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Joel.
Next up, I'd like to introduce Will Gee. Will is the founder and CEO of Balti Virtual and has been working in 3D graphics for over 20 years, starting in the video game industry at Microprose Software. In 2015, he founded Balti Virtual, a full-service creative agency focused on augmented reality and virtual reality that has created experience for HBO, PayPal, Starbucks, and others. Will, thank you for being here.
Great to be here.
Last and certainly not least, we have Adam Kaplan. So Adam comes to us from Israel, by the way, and co-founded and served as an executive in technology companies, including Xenex, Athoc, which was acquired by BlackBerry, Digital Guardian, and Tonian. He has over a decade of corporate strategy and business-to-business sales experience in large technology companies. Adam is currently the co-founder and CEO of Edgybees. Adam, welcome. Thanks for joining us. Okay, so I'd like to just kind of jump right in. I gave a very brief introduction there on immersive technologies. And again, from my perspective, I use that term because, one, AR and VR are different, but now you've got some other terms like XR and MR and SR, and I'm sure I missed one in there. But I wanted to kind of throw this out to sort of everybody. And I'd like for each of you to sort of take an opportunity and from your background and from the work that you have been doing and from the companies that we work for and the work that you're currently doing, talk to us about the different use cases and how they differ among AR and VR, right? And so we could talk about anything from, I think there's a lot of great uses like esports or learning and education or medical or enterprise use. And I think each technology is going to have its own sort of use case within there. So I wanted to kind of take the opportunity, allow you guys the opportunity to sort of talk about that. So Sophia, let's start with you first.
Yeah, just to baseline what VR and what AR is, virtual reality completely occludes your current environment, puts you somewhere else that's either real or made up. And then there's 2 types really. There's 360 video, which is passively viewing content that is recorded of a real environment. And then there's interactive VR, which is graphically rendered content in which the user can actively affect the environment, which is commonly used for training and learning and such. And then there's augmented reality, where you can see the environment around you and you're placing virtual graphics or information within your current physical environment. So that at a high level, from my perspective, are the differences between AR and VR and kind of everything in between. And there's a lot more that you can go into depth with some other terminology. And the DoD likes to refer to it actually as cross reality. So that's one that was not mentioned in there. And that's another one. That was a new one I learned this year actually, which makes sense because if you think of the term XR, it makes sense that they would refer to it as cross reality.
I'm writing that one down, cross reality.
Yeah, right?
That's a new one for me.
So it's, again, perfect use cases for anything that involves training. And you can understand cognitive skills like understanding information visually, observational skills, and emotional responses. And it's more engaging and induces more of that emotional reaction. And because of that, it results in increased retention and recall from developing that muscle memory of actually doing and experiencing. And then there's also like cohesive user data that you can pull from engaging with virtual and augmented reality that you couldn't do in real life or you couldn't do in other methodologies and mediums, such as user behavior, understanding their movement, their emotions, using the eye tracking capabilities, and coming up with this cohesive understanding of that user and their interactions with that environment. And then again, having the ability to be able to train and practice in a contextual real environment versus text, where you're just reading words on the paper and then kind of translating that into your own context, which may or may not match the intention of what that training was meant to deliver. And then exposure to real life situations and being able to experience consequences in a safe environment, being able to fail safely is the term I like to use, to avoid these severe consequences from mistakes that may be made. It could be made during on-the-job training. So those are just, again, high-level kind of capabilities of what people or companies may use virtual and augmented reality for.
Yeah, I think those are some great points too, and to your point about being able to try things safely. I think academia has been doing that. Academia has been doing that for a while, right? Like particularly in the psychology field, where they can introduce different things without sort of putting any of the users in any physical danger. So great, Sophia. I appreciate that. Some great insight. And Michael, I'll turn it over to you. And kind of the same sort of question, right? Like, so like from your point of view, the difference between AR, VR, and then, where they kind of apply use case wise.
Yeah, thanks. Sophia, I think nailed it on the head.
Bonus points if you can, I was going to say bonus points if you could throw out a new term as well, like Sophia did.
I was going to say there might be new terms since we started the webinar. So
I'll just have to add some acronyms in there or something. No, but I think she nailed it on the head on the differences, right? I mean, what Google kind of sees a lot of, especially on the AR side, is a lot more companies using AR, especially on the enterprise side, where VR is still kind of more on the academia, gaming kind of future looking, where we see a lot more money coming in from the enterprises on AR. For example, like we just did a deal with DIU within the DoD, since I know a lot of our audience is DoD related, with augmented microscopes, where we're using machine learning within the microscopes, GPU on the microscopes, for pathologists who are looking at basically slices of testicular cancer and breast cancer film. So the AI can obviously identify cancer a lot quicker and more accurately than a human can, and plus it's a very repetitive task. So that's where we're seeing like kind of AR uses a lot. Google Glasses, if you're familiar with them, a lot of industries are using those within their manufacturing process because they can detect the screw is off, there's a dent here that maybe the naked eye has problems detecting. So a lot of focus, I think, and currently in deals going on right now within kind of the AR market. VR, I still think it's great, as Sophia was mentioning, for training, keeps people safe, especially for like doing missions or something like that, simulated missions or anything that's very dangerous. But obviously, if you're doing VR, I mean, it's still, if you go and do VR, it's not quite reality, right? You can't really experience true reality with your VR. Where AR, you still see what's in front of you, and you're getting that additional information that you might not be missing, or it just improves the experience of the user overall, right? A lot of their tasks are very repetitive, and using machine learning and AI can reduce that repetitiveness. So there's a lot of focus currently from our customer base on that AR side more than the VR itself, from Google's perspective.
Thanks, and also great points there. So Will, I throw it over to you now, and really again, same question, right? So AR, VR, and the different use cases, or your perspective on it and the different use cases.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone covered it really well. What I would add would be one of the big differences today is that AR is easily accessed on phones. I think there's just a stat release that there are now over 1 billion AR core capable phones out there, which is pretty amazing, where VR is limited to specialty headset devices. So long term, I mean, we see these things as very, very similar. I think an AR headset of the future is going to be pretty similar to a VR headset. could very easily be a VR headset with a pass-through camera, something like that. So those differences suddenly become kind of like shades of gray. So really there's like the difference between AR and VR today is pretty massive, where longer term, they're sort of converging a little bit. So in terms of use cases, I think that sort of echoes where any use case where you're okay to use specialized hardware that isn't super widely available, like training or testing or education or something like that, VR starts to make sense, kind of like where computers were in the 80s, right? They were sort of at schools, they weren't really in homes. I think AR is a lot more sort of anyone can access it. So the applications are a lot wider for the general public today. But as far as the difference between MR and XR and any other, like they're all sort of like, I think it sort of underscores the fact that this is just a rapidly evolving field, and there's going to be a new R by the time we're done this conversation. So it's just kind of, you know, it's all shaking out.
Yeah, it's almost like a race to see who can get their term accepted first, right? Like it's almost it seems like that. So no, yeah.
I'm trying to push for asterisk R. I think that would be the best, is just cover everything in the future.
All right, there you go. I'll give you a couple points there for that one then as well. So Adam, turn it over to you then. And again, I mean, I think at this point, you know, everybody's probably covered the difference, but would be very curious to see, you know, if you've got anything. Yeah, sorry, you're last on this one. I'll get you first on the next one.
Yeah, so I'm not going to get into the alphabet soup of XR, VR, all that kind of stuff, and also we're dealing with DoD, which has another 1,000 acronyms that we could start talking about. But what it all comes down to, and so my company, we fit in both in AR and VR. What we do is we geo-register data. We take real-time data, and we can accurately place it on video. So our work with the DoD is mainly being done with the unmanned vehicles, where you take real-time data and you can place it on top of a video so you can understand what you're looking at from a drone. And we worked in public safety, like if you got a flooded road and you want to overlay the street name on top of it, so during the hurricanes. So for us, whether the visual device is on VR goggles or AR goggles or on a tablet or on a phone, in the end, you know, I think people have gotten into the whole AR, VR, and all the acronyms. In the end, it's about creating business value for the customer, and it doesn't matter whether it's XR or ZR or whatever it may be, but it's about creating value for the customer and not just put it this way. I know the folks, the founders of Pokemon Go, and it's a great thing, but I think it's the real things are on the especially in the stuff that we're dealing with the DoD is making sure that people have the right information on their video and in whatever forum they're looking at. So I think, as you said, that I think it's all these acronyms will go away. It's going to be about, I think the best thing I've seen is people want, they watch Everybody Likes NFL, is everyone wants that 1st and 10-yard line, but in a real-time environment, whether they're looking in a factory or if they're looking at a drone in a battlefield scenario.
Right. Yeah. And so I think that's all great, like input there. And I'll even give you credit for ZR, but we'll have to define that. So, but I'll give you credit for that one for now. So, and I think you actually, and I was going to give 100 bonus points, by the way, to somebody who mentioned metaverse, but nobody did. So I'll hold on to those points for me for now. So, but Adam, you actually bring up another point that I often kind of think about when we're looking at AR and VR, right? So, and we've talked about it. The four of you have talked a little bit about sort of some of the current use cases, right? But I think a lot of times people will look at VR, for example, or AR and say, oh, well, it's just another gaming platform, right? Like it's just sort of, it's almost like a novelty kind of thing, right? Like, oh, it's going to go away. But I don't think that's the case, right? But I think it's great for adoption. It's great for getting the fact that there's AR out there or VR out into the general population, right? So with that in mind, I wanted to give our audience a sense of what's actually occurring now in VR or AR, right? And so Adam, you talked a little bit about overlaying, data on video from drones, from UASs. What else is out there, right, that you see that you find to be pretty cool that can help drive sort of adoption?
Yeah, of course there's, the consumer, business to consumer gaming stuff, but I see lots of stuff being used in factory floors. I got a friend of mine who's got a startup that's dealing with, AR for, in aerospace and making sure you got thousands of components. So it's really, this is, as time goes by, it's, and I've got folks that I know who, another AR friend of mine who's got, they're using it actually part of COVID, so that there's like a helmets and stuff like this. And I've seen it for firefighters. I mean, in the end, it's about allowing you to see what you can't see with your own eyes in many cases. And there's thousands of these types of applications out there. The most well-known AR application, of course, is Pokemon Go. But I know Pokemon Go type applications that are interesting for the public safety market, for the DoD market, and for enterprise market. So this is where it's now getting interesting. This is no longer novelty where we're putting filters of mustaches and stuff like this. It's all the goofy stuff has kind of gone away, and now it's about the real, mission-driven type of applications.
I mean, I almost feel like the goofy stuff is or was necessary to introduce the consumer market to what AR and VR are, right? And what the possibilities are. And so now that we're there and people understand like the fundamentals of what it can achieve at a basic level, now we can start applying and strategically applying the technologies in a variety of ways, because now people kind of understand the capabilities and they're going to apply it themselves to their own industries and their own professions, because now they have been introduced to it and understand it at this basic level. And to add to that, there's a lot of creation of digital twins that are being done. So that's basically recreating physical locations and environments and bringing them into the virtual space. And then to add on top of that is being able to connect those environments and control those environments through virtual with, IoT sensors, which is a lot of what, you're doing as well, Adam, and I'm sure others. And then something more on, the social side, because I'm not a gamer myself. I love VR and AR, but I love the applications of the technologies in more purpose-driven scenarios. So something that I've been involved with is something called Ready Player Golf, which I know Joel knows a lot about and has been supportive of. And that is basically combining esports with the social and networking aspect of what we want, and how we want to connect with people in these geographically diverse technologies. And so I got excited at using XR technology in this like collaborative networking capacity and being able to connect esports with real needs of charitable organizations. What Ready Player Golf was the first virtual reality charity golf tournament. So we brought people in to a space, used commercial off-the-shelf hardware and software applications, and kind of logistically connected all these dots to create this tournament in which people would contribute to a charity organization and participate in this tournament. Again, people understand what golf is in real world and why they would play golf, other than the fact that it's fun. They're going there to do business, make relationships, develop their network, socialize, those types of things. So then translating that to this virtual space kind of made sense to people off the bat. And so we got like 75 people there. We partnered with Doctors Without Borders, and then we did this award show at the end, again, utilizing a virtual space in a different way than you would have done an award show in a physical space. So it's not always about recreating the real environment. It's about what more can you do with a 3D environment that you wouldn't have been able to do in virtual. And then, you know, side note to that is that, you know, people and organizations that are fundraising for a variety of reasons, and specifically in this case, it's for charity, they are looking for other ways to generate revenue, because a lot of this stuff was done in person, traditionally done in person, and through a lot of these golf tournaments or golf type tournaments. So this was just another way, another avenue for an organization like Doctors Without Borders, who was really needing, you know, and looking for ways to generate revenue throughout this past year. And they got excited at the opportunity of exploring virtual methodologies to be able to do that.
Yeah, and I agree. I believe it is going to open up a whole set of possibilities of, there are going to be things we didn't even think about, right? Because it's going to open up, like in VR, for example, the law of physics doesn't necessarily apply, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you know, there are, and to, I think, Adam, you made the point earlier where there's things like, it's the part of it is about seeing things you wouldn't normally see, right? Or couldn't normally see. So I mean, with that, I mean, I want to offer the other two panelists the same opportunity, right? Like, so Will, I mean, as you're, you know, obviously you've got your company, you're building some VR or some AR, particular AR experiences that you showed us. I mean, what else is, you know, where else is the technology being used? That's not a novelty, not a game kind of, you know, thing.
Sorry, I muted myself. Well, so a couple things. Yeah, we do every R, you know, past, present, future. But I think quickly the idea that something is just a gaming technology is like almost one of the highest compliments you can give a piece of technology, because that's like where so many things start. I mean, think about like what's happening now in AI is effectively due to GPUs, like running old ideas. So I mean, I think there are all these kind of things that start where this is the first use case for really powerful computing, really you know, whatever. But outside of just straight entertainment, I think we've sort of touched on them. The idea of education, VR's fantastic for getting that sense of actually doing something while still being able to completely isolate variables that aren't possible in the real world, right? Like we talked about the idea of learning how to juggle, but being able to control gravity. So you could turn it to like moon gravity and go really slow and then slowly turn it up. And then you could, you know, like learn the muscle memory in a way that wouldn't be possible in the real world.
Right.
So those types of things, obviously AR just, I mean, I think Adam really explained it well. It's just a display device overlaying information more contextually to what you're looking at. What, you know, what is that? What are the aspects of the thing that I'm looking at that are important to me specifically? I think that's a big piece. But yeah, I mean, I think we've done a lot across entertainment, education, kind of explaining things, whether that's for sales or marketing. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think interested to hear to Mike's thoughts.
Thanks, Will. I mean, I do think one of the things we'll see a lot of in the future, especially on kind of the AR side, is, I mean, right now there's a lot of human in the loop where, for example, I mean, you're looking at radiology, any of these things, you're just reviewing tons and tons of data a day, right? Machines are better at that, let's be honest, right? They're more accurate, they're faster, they don't get tired, they don't have to sleep every night. So, but you don't want machines making life-changing decisions, or at least not yet. People aren't comfortable with that in the world. So you still need doctors to review with the findings of the machine. So I think any type like AR is just speeding those processes up. You're going to see a lot of that. Also, in terms of VR, you're going to be able to practice a lot of these things. For example, surgeries are going to be practiced in VR. You already see it in sports, right? All the sports now, the little kids, like back when I played sports, you just went out and did it. Now they have all these techniques to look at there. My technique is off, my hand for like a golf swing, you know, I'm opening my wrist. All that can be done through these AR apps. So I do think it's going to change, just not, you know, everyone's lifestyle. You know, it's not just, you know, business users using it for business activity. It's little kids learning how to play soccer, shoot the goals better, right? So all that is going to kind of trickle in everywhere in society, I believe, in the future, right? And in VR, as it gets better and better, people will use it for more and more stuff. Not only will it be for training, but then people will start using it as a social aspect as well. So I think You know, as we move toward the future, GPUs are getting cheaper. I think eventually, as you see the gaming systems now, right, we're kind of moving, like Stadia. Obviously, I work at Google, so I'll talk about Stadia. We're moving away to having to have a GPU in my house to all be a cloud, give me a 5G connection, and I can have, you know, my phone will be my VR glasses, and it'll all work. So I think as more and more people have the technology available, as these things get cheaper, you'll see it, you know, kind of everything will start having some aspects of it. More information is always useful for most humans.
Yeah, and actually, Michael, I think you provide an excellent segue to the next question I wanted to ask, which was, you know, what, and it really centers around the adoption of these technologies, right? So VR's been around for a while, right? Like, I mean, if you consider, you know, simulators in general as virtual reality, right? Like VR technology has been around for a while. But we haven't quite seen the adoption rates, I think, that you would expect for a technology that's been around that long. AR, I mean, I think it's you know, still, like, I think the technology is there, but the adoption's just not, right? So to me, that means there may be, you know, ancillary technologies that AR and VR rely upon, right? So I wanted to just kind of throw the question out, and I'll open this up to really anybody who wants to answer it however they want. But what's holding adoption back, right? Like, why are we not at sort of mass adoption for these technologies that have so much potential?
Yeah, I mean, I could jump in quickly. One small thing I think with that is, like, VR has been around for a really long time, you know, like going back, or even AR, like Ivan Sutherland's Sword of Damocles was like in the 50s. I just think in general, technology sort of follows a relatively predictable curve, and then there are sort of little bumps in the road where new technologies come out. In this case, it was tons of new screens from smartphones, better sensors, better processing. But at the same time, when there are these little bumps, there are these like huge jumps in the amount of hype around something. So like in 2014, everyone was going to have VR next year, you know, and like that was not really based on anything other than just people getting excited about the technology, just like in the 90s. You know, and then it goes back to like VR's dead. I mean, and going back to, I don't know, 2000, the internet was dead. Like they were like, oh, why hasn't this happened yet? Like this thing's over. It's taking too long. Dot bomb, you know, whatever. So I think you sort of have to decouple what's happening technologically and what's happening in terms of like perceived where something is relative to where it should be. But I do think there have been some pretty big gains in terms of users of all these technologies. I mean, if you look at people using AR now daily across the board, there's huge amounts of mostly entertainment, mostly things like Pokemon or Snap. VR, I think it's going to be a slow build, and probably it'll need that critical mass of like great content. And I think the beauty of it is that it's not going away, right? Like, so Apple Glass is going to be able to play Beat Saber. It's going to be able to play like all of the stuff that's come before. And so it's sort of just building up this snowball, I think. So I don't know, that's my 2 cents.
Going off of what Will said, I think at least in terms of VR, it is the applications that are available to the consumers and to the general public, because you're either a gamer, you're an enthusiast, kind of, you know, wanting to explore the possibilities and what's on these headsets and available on these headsets, or your enterprise who are making, you know, kick-ass developments and projects, of which only are available to those that you're deploying it to. Or, you know, the military obviously is doing a lot of incredible things with the synthetic training environment and other initiatives. But I kind of compare it to when the smartphone was just released, because smartphone was released, didn't know what to use it for really. Applications just started being developed that weren't really useful. It was like interesting to play with and all of that. But now we couldn't imagine our lives without it, because there's actual real value that the smartphone brings in the applications that are available on the smartphone. So I think once the technology offers true value to everyday life, that is when the consumer adoption will start to skyrocket. And And then, you know, and then on the other side of things, I think, like I mentioned before, I don't think a lot of people honestly even know that they are using AR on their mobile devices through these filters on Snapchat and Instagram and Pokemon Go and such. But there's features and updates that have been happening that are going to continue to make web XR content more available, like Apple's new iOS 14.3 update, which allows web AR content to be accessed through various major iOS applications and internet browsers. So it basically will increase the reach to the 700+ million iPhone users worldwide. So there's just a lot of developments that are happening that will continue to gain traction.
Sure, and sort of a follow-up to that, right? Like, is, you know, we were talking prior to the panel actually going live, right? Like with the kind of the joke of, hey, we're doing virtual learning, but we somehow still had a snow day, you know, yesterday, right? And then, but then that really does kind of lead into, you know, well, hey, you know, VR for education, maybe that could be helpful, and do that. Is connectivity an issue, right? Is cost an issue? I mean, are those drivers as well? I'll let anybody answer that one as well.
I mean, I definitely think cost is a big part of that, especially on the VR side, right? I mean, until recently, you had to have a high-end gaming rig, you had to have VR connected, wired to your head, you're stuck in your house, you're still smashing into things, right? And, you know, it just was kind of expensive and it wasn't that cool. I mean, they nailed it on the head. The applications weren't that great. I mean, they're sort of fun to play for 30 minutes in terms of games, but then you're like, okay, let me go back and play my PlayStation. So, I mean, those two are big, right? Cost is, like Sophia mentioned, when it's on the iPhone and it's highly available to a huge range of people, it'll be, the adoption will obviously pick up versus when it's a specialty kind of gaming system that costs $1,000+. I mean, you're pretty limited in your adoption rate. So I think cost is a big one, and they nailed it on the head. Like, we have to have cool applications that really make people use it.
Yeah. And sorry, Adam, I don't know if you're trying.
Additionally, on that, you know, in terms of VR, you know, VR was kind of all the rage a few years ago until people realized, and I think there was a good analogy that Disney started putting in VR until they realized, what are we doing? Why are we putting stuff over people's faces when they're on a ride? And then they suddenly took it out of the theme parks, and the management said, we're taking the VR because you're losing the ability to interact with the real world. So the reason why AR, I think, is picking up steam, it allows you to combine the real and the virtual world all in one. I mean, VR does have its applications, but I think AR is going to be far more prevalent as time goes by.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought, and a very interesting thought. So, I mean, and I wonder, you know, we talked about how the perception of where it should be, where, you know, where the technologies are and where they should be. I mean, but has COVID-19 driven any demand, right? I mean, everybody's working from home. I mean, some people I would think that, hey, there should, you know, somebody's developed an app so that I can meet all my coworkers in a single space without having to do the constant Zoom or GoToMeeting thing, right? Like that we're doing here. Has anybody seen any adoption rates increase because of that?
I mean, I'll jump in. I won't speak specifically to just AR, VR, but I mean, digital transformation in terms of the last year, I've seen a massive adoption that was not there before, especially like in the DoD, when they all realize they can't all be on base or in a skiff and communicate anymore, right? That caused a lot of issues. And you see that with companies worldwide. It wasn't just the DoD, but DoD was a perfect example just because of the problems they had. But like the adoption to, hey, wait, this old paradigm of we have to have all of our servers sitting in a single location, we have to have all of our users in that location, kind of got broken on its head. So companies are moving, how do I go to digital meetings? Like all that, you know, has changed. So in terms of AR, I think they're also realizing, yes, we should be using AR and virtual reality. I mean, this obviously isn't virtual reality, but, you know, all these virtual meetings that we're sitting through 8 hours a day on now have, I mean, before maybe we were on, you know, 2 hours a week or something. Now we're on 40 hours a week. So I've seen a definite change, especially in the business environment, on just digital adoption overall.
Yeah, we're required to be on all the time. The work never ends, and snow days do not exist in our world.
Unfortunately.
I have to say my own personal demand for VR has gone up quite a lot during lockdown. Basically, just it's been a godsend to be able to jump into Half-Life or whatever, get out of my actual house that I've been looking at for the last 9 months.
Yeah, I mean, as an escape, right? I mean, I know there's quite a few use cases for VR in psychology, right, or in like therapy kind of sessions, right? I mean, so that I think actually is a great point. And you know, again, it's not like, yes, it's gaming, but it's really more about personal health and personal wellness, right? Like, and I know there's quite a few apps, both on the AR and VR side that do that. So that's a great point. I want to kind of move on here to the next, well, the next sub question really in this is, okay, so we talked about all of these great use cases and even some of the things that might be holding it back. 2021, what does it look like, right? Do some of these barriers get lifted, right? I mean, COVID, I think, is an interesting catalyst, right? But is it enough? Is that going to be enough to push into 2021? And what does 2021 look like from an AR, VR perspective?
First, I just think it's really interesting and intriguing how fast people and companies and entities just innovate in a time where they need to. Because we have seen, you know, tremendous adoption of virtual technologies across the board, and just a different perspective on how we are able to conduct business. And so I think there are definitely new standards that are being set across the board of how to do e-commerce, how to work collaboratively, how to reach a global community. Especially in the event space and conferences, where you see the shift of, you know, these huge conferences happening that usually happen in places like Vegas, where they need this huge space, and they're converting to these virtual mediums. And, you know, while it does pose some challenges, some obvious challenges, but I think now the new expectation is going to be kind of having that hybrid event. Now that people have seen some of the advantages of being able to do things virtually. I mean, they can, again, they can collaborate, network a lot easier, be able to multitask and message people on LinkedIn and do their follow-ups instantly. Being able to attend without the logistics headaches of having to get there, and the costs have reduced for the attendees. Being able to access content on demand, and not having to pick and choose which sessions you're going to in person. Like, all of these things, I think, are the new baseline expectation. So while there are advantages of meeting in person, which can't be replaced necessarily, I think that they're going to be augmented by these other technologies. So I think that's, you know, the example of events, but you know, industries and companies are looking for ways to implement collaboration, communication, training in this geographically dispersed workforce. And I think it's allowed for a new understanding of potential efficiencies of being able to do that. And they're now reconsidering the need and allocation of overhead expenditures, such as like physical offices. What do we really need them for? And I'm sure there is a need for it, but it's not going to be the same as what it was before. And we're going to continue to see that evolution.
Yeah, great points. Anybody else want to jump in there? What does 2021 look like?
Well, I was going to say, I agree. I absolutely agree. I mean, I think that we just went through this sort of mass forced experiment of, okay, we've got to switch how we're working. We've got to switch how we're doing everything. And I'm sure, you know, post-pandemic, we're going to have probably a massive overcorrection in the other direction, and everyone's just going to like pack into the first bar they can find and whatever. But then I think we'll kind of settle back into some sort of steady state where we're looking at, oh, you know what, that actually worked pretty well. And like for some of these things, and maybe CES is always going to be in person, but maybe the second tier event or this third tier event like doesn't need to be, you know, in a location. So I absolutely think this is going to continue.
Yeah, I think that there's probably going to end up being a hybrid model. I think most of the industry, military as well as commercial, is realized we got to be able to support communication and collaboration either when we're together or remote virtually. And I think probably going forward you'll see some hybrid of that working out, where companies maybe on site a couple of days a week, remote a couple of days a week, especially now as we're getting 5G and all the rollout of high bandwidth to throughout the United States. We'll see probably more and more of that. Right? Part of the problem now is we're always worried, especially we were talking about this beforehand about schools. Some kids don't have the network necessary to attend virtually, or can't barely see the teacher. It's breaking up. So I think as that rolls out and we have more of that infrastructure in place throughout the United States and other countries, we'll be more and more virtual going forward. And as Will mentioned, I'm sure people, trust me, and we're all going to want to get the hell out of the house and go to an actual conference and have some beers with our coworkers. But, in the future, I think it will be that kind of mixed hybrid model.
Yeah. Adam, do you want to throw any predictions out there for what 2021 is going to look like?
Better than 2020, I hope. That's I think that's the first thing. But I think we're all seeing, the flight to technology. It's sort of the transformation in the past, 9 months has basically been usually what would probably take about 10 years. So I think it's, I think it's robots, AR, VR. It's all going to be very, very interesting and continue to grow.
Great. So I wanted to switch to my last topic, and it's going to center around cybersecurity, because as a cybersecurity nonprofit, I think we'd be remiss to not sort of talk about it here. So I mean, AR and VR, it is IT, so there are obvious, there are still cybersecurity issues associated with it that would align with general IT cybersecurity. But what other challenges are there from a security perspective? Because these devices are collecting a lot of data, right? Or they require a lot of data. And honestly, a note I wrote down as we were talking was, and something I didn't even bring up here yet, was sort of the idea of an AR cloud, right? So, and I think Adam mentioned it when he said, hey, it's good, you're going to have the ability to see things that aren't normally there. Well, that to me is the AR cloud, because we've put things in AR that have to live persistently somewhere, right? So are there issues associated with that? What other kind of issues, I think, do you guys foresee with AR or VR? And then Will, I'll throw that one out to you first.
Well, I see a huge potential for massive issues across the board. I don't think there's any way to sugarcoat it. I think every new technology brings potential hazards, potential issues, and strapping a bunch of cameras to your head that are streaming a live view of what you're seeing to the world. Obviously, that has some huge privacy implications and all sorts of things like that. It's going to be interesting to see how different companies tackle that. It seems like some of the potential rumors around Apple are that they're going to mostly focus on LiDAR data, so then, okay, maybe it's not the ability to fully see what you're seeing, but kind of a point cloud mesh, and that would be locally processed. So I think it's going to have to be something that really everybody continues to talk about, that users push for, and that users say, okay, what are the privacy features of this device? How is this not exposing my data or something about what I'm doing to the world? I mean, especially when you get into, a standard feature of next generation headsets is going to be eye tracking. The amount of information that you can pull from that is terrifying. So it has to be secured well. I think that's the bottom line.
Great points. Anyone else want to jump in there?
I'll jump in. Go ahead, Sophia.
I was just going to say, with eye tracking, as much as you can attain all these new sets of data that you couldn't have otherwise, which could be potentially harmful, you can use things like eye tracking to improve identity and access management with multi-factor authentication. So it could be used, technology can be used for good or evil, depending on how it's used. But yeah, so there's different attacker objectives potentially in immersive technology, like now, you know, it's more of everything. So like the cyberbullying, hijacking user identities, and tracking their behaviors within immersive environments, obtaining virtual commodities, you know, obtaining real money through the environment, healthcare information, again with the use of AR being, you know, being able to help patients and attaining all that data from the patients. So I know that there's, you know, strict regulation against that. So I know there's a lot of work being done in the healthcare space to be able to be utilized in that space. But so there's a couple terms that I'll throw out at you guys. There's something called social engineering, which is basically the ability of technology to reach the point of convincing the brain that it's somewhere that it's not, and then believe things that aren't true. So there's a lot of opportunity to take advantage of human vulnerabilities that are enormous within immersive. And then there's something called deep fakes, which I'm sure many of you guys are familiar with, which is incredible. So definitely YouTube it after this, but it's basically, it allows for the manipulation of voices and videos to look like genuine footage. And then what you can do with that is superimpose that on someone else's likeness in the user's VR experience, which can then mislead users into giving away personal information. So it's just a more genuine, authentic, real way of misleading users. I mean, we have examples of this on the web and 2D mechanisms, but in virtual, it just gets more convincing.
Yeah, and it's the security guy. I'll add my little piece. I mean, obviously, you're always worried about, you know, where is the data going? How is it stored? Is it, you know, is it encrypted and transferred? Is it encrypted while it's at rest, etc. I mean, right now, if you kind of look at the vendors out there, they say stuff is encrypted. It doesn't say it's stored in the United States. So for DoD, that's going to raise red flags, right? I think Sophia nailed it on the head. The eye tracking probably falls under PHI, so it's probably IL4, impact level 4 in terms of DoD. So that it adds additional controls that need to be added to it. And I also think we'll probably start seeing a lot of the GPUs be pushed out to the cloud. And then you always have to worry in any type of large multi-cloud environment, you know, is someone like a sysadmin going in and, you know, looking through what's going on my headset, tracking my movements, tracking my location, tracking my IP, etc. One of the technology I think we'll see especially is kind of what's called confidential compute, which is now a lot of the Intel, the AMDs of the world have started adding encryption chips into their actual CPUs, at least CPUs so far only, that basically lock the KVM out from like a system admin. So like a Google employee can't go in and say, let me break into this VM and see what's going on, the processes running, etc. So we'll probably see that in the GPUs as well. AMD's already announced they're going to add that to their GPUs at least. So additional security controls, and then, you know, privacy is always a concern, right? You need to figure out, and I think companies are finally starting to be better at the privacy laws and kind of being a little bit more direct in their privacy statement of what's actually stored and why it's stored and who it's shared with. But it still tends to be, you have to be a lawyer or a security geek and sit there and read 20 pages to understand all that, right? So like the average consumer who goes and buys an Oculus is not reading the actual privacy laws for that device. So they don't know what's being stored, and it'll probably scare them if they actually go and read it.
Yeah, and it's funny you bring up Oculus. I've actually read the Facebook terms of service, and it is not fun. And you're right. I think the average user would probably be quite shocked at what they're giving up essentially, right, by using Oculus, which is very closely tied to Facebook. I'm not sure if Adam dropped off. So I think what I would like to do now is I have a comment and a question, and again, for the audience, if you do have any questions, please continue to drop them into the Q&A window, and we'll get to those. So I'll start with a comment first from James. Thank you, James. He said, law enforcement in higher education has a lot to benefit. Thank you for the research and application testing moving forward. I'm in both fields and both are equally important. You're making our world better. So that's a comment. So thank you, James, for providing that. And that's a thank you to the panelists and everybody else out there working on AR and VR. I do have a question from Paula Hollingsworth. She says, in 2021, do you think the biggest growth will be within DoD applications or within the commercial sector? Okay,
DoD is my customer base. I'll take it, I guess. I mean, I think commercial is obviously normally ahead of the curve versus DoD. DoD tends to lag, unfortunately, in some of these technologies. A lot of it, to be honest, has to do with some of the compliance regulations that just a lot of these companies can't meet out the box, right? You have to be FedRAMP high, you have to be IL4. A lot of these kind of leading edge companies aren't that. It takes a long time to go through it. My company's going through it now on some of the impact levels, so very familiar with how long that process takes. So I think commercial will definitely lead the way. DoD is recognizing, like I talked about that, deal we do with DIU about augmented reality. So I think they've realized the value is there. They'll be slower to adopt, I think, than commercial will. My 2 cents.
Yeah, and not only adopt the technology, but adopt the technology in these various capacities of what more it can do besides deliver an environment in 360 degrees, right? Because I think that's kind of where they're at right now, from my perspective, talking about government. But commercial will be the testing ground for what more virtual and augmented reality can deliver, using brain-computer interface and things like that. And then it's going to be obviously adopted by, I mean, it goes back and forth, right? Which is why the largest training and simulation hub is in Orlando, where the entertainment sector is. I mean, they borrow technology from each other. And now there's methods for acquisition for innovative technologies, for R&D and those types of things, where I believe that the DoD and government is trying to get on board faster. So at least I think from like an R&D prototyping perspective, I think they are kind of getting the ball rolling in that regard. But in terms of like mass adoption, I think there's a lot of interoperability hurdles that they're going to have to overcome.
Yeah, thanks. Will, did you have a thought there?
Same thought. I think they lag behind. I think it's by design. I think it's probably a good thing. Ultimately, we just talked about all the potential issues. So, yeah.
Sure. Okay. I'm not sure we've had any other questions come in. So I have a question of my own, aside from the last couple I've asked you already. Normally we do these networking events on the fourth Thursday, last Thursday of the month. That happens to fall during Christmas, right, week, so we moved it up. So all that to say, it's the holiday season, right? I think, AR, VR, what's your holiday gift giving guide? So, with the AR, VR, it could be hardware or software, any technology associated with it. And Sophia, we'll start with you.
I mean, the Oculus Quest 2, I think, is on everybody's Christmas list this year. I think we're going to see an influx of purchases. Probably from my guess is going to be purchases for kids, and then the parents are going to be the ones that are kind of testing and using the device just to kind of dabble in it and see what the potential is of the technology. So I think that's the way that a lot of adults are going to be introduced to the technology this year. But I do think that we're going to see an influx of headset purchases, particularly the Quest this year for Christmas.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up with the Quest, because again, going through Facebook's terms of service, you have to have a Facebook account to use a Quest. In order to have a Facebook account, you have to be 13. So we'll see how that plays out. But Michael, I wanted to give you an opportunity to what's your holiday gift, your gift giving guide?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're on the AR VR route, she's right. The Quest is the way to go. But I mean, if you're still just trying to play normal games, I'm still for the Xbox Series X or the PS5 if you can somehow track one down. Or if you're a computer person, go out and get the new NVIDIA graphics card, and you can actually do your own VR AR through that if you have one of the other non self-contained headsets. So hard to find, but great fun.
Yeah.
Okay, in about the last minute here, Will, I'll turn it over to you for the closing comments there.
I mean, Quest is a winner. Unfortunately, now they are sold out into 2021. So I'd say without that, that Mario Kart AR racing game seems like a pretty awesome thing on Switch there. So
Awesome. All right. Well, great. Thank you all, Sophia, Michael, Will, and Adam, who unfortunately dropped off there. But I want to thank all of you for taking the time today to meet with us and engage with our community and our members, talking about AR and VR. So, and to our members, actually, I think we have one last question if you guys are willing to hold on here a little bit longer.
Sure.
fire away.
Oh, so on the security and the privacy things and topics that we talked about, the question is anybody approaching, from the legal and policy perspective, is anybody approaching Congress or state legislatures to sort of, to mitigate those risks that you know of? It's kind of a tough question. It's
Maybe
if
the
you're not in there.
EFF, maybe? I'm not sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
If
what I will say is that there is a Congressional Reality Caucus that has established to kind of understand what the potential issues are and applications of the technology. So I don't know exactly what they are doing right now. And my guess is that, you know, they're very surface level with you know, their research into the technology. So I do think it's going to take you know, people from industry to kind of help spearhead their efforts in understanding how to navigate the technology.
And I'll mention one quick thing, 10 seconds, is that if you actually look at the Oculus for business, the enterprise privacy agreement for the business, it's like 10 times better than for the consumer. They don't store any of that stuff they do for the consumer. So I'll give Facebook credit for that. You know, the business users, they basically control their own data.
Yeah. And I'll just add, you know, there are organizations out there that do work on safety, privacy. XR Safety Initiative is one of them that does that. Will, you mentioned EFF. They're starting to get involved as well. So, and to Sophia's point, I think we will start to see a lot more interaction at the legal and policy level. So, so with that, I would like to again thank Sophia, Michael, Will, and Adam who dropped off. Again, thank you for taking the time to engage with us in our community. I enjoyed the conversation, and to all of our folks out there, happy holidays, and I guess we'll see you next year. All right, thank you.
Everyone.
Good talking with y'all. Take care.